things. Alrighty, so right off the bat, one of the most important things that we set out to do since last time when we met was to iron out a lot of bugs, a lot of optimization, finishing the leveling system, spec ops, and just kind of starting to get the remaining of the systems online, operational, and getting to a point where we can work on the UI and we can work on any other last minute bugs that are just kind of persisting. Okay, so right off the bat, we're going to jump right into the ability system. So let me go ahead and I'm going to open up our SDK, switch to my share screen, and then we're going to just kind of jump right into it. So bear with me. We got in the XP boost, we got in the Spec Ops Flashbang, the Winter's Cloak, and basically slowly but surely chipped away at the remaining legacy abilities for the classes. And then we got the Flashbang also. So once this loads up. Okay, so we're going to go and we're going to jump into my test map. Or go to my Robert one. And we're going to just demonstrate. So let me delete the operator. We're going to go ahead and put in Winters, the Spec Ops, and play with them. Oh, let me turn off multiplayer so I can just test these quickly. And then spawn right in, zoom in. And you're going to notice right off the bat, the Spec Ops has this flashbang. We took out the night vision as like a button you had to press. It's just automatic. Going into the UI pass, we're going to go ahead and just make the quality of life change of just having a passives area in the details panel. And the idea there is that like if your unit has a passive like Winters, where she provides like an XP boost, just by highlighting it, it's dynamic. Because again, our biggest thing going into this rebuild was allowing us more flexibility to give more nuances and small little differences to every individual unit, just so we can make them more distinguished and play differently. So it's not just a reskinned unit. So, we got Winters in. She has her base weapons. I showed that very briefly. The Spec Ops got all of his weapons, the one Patreon weapon. I think 2 of these weapons are Patreon weapons. The TAC-21 and the FAMAS. And then they got all geared up and set up. And then we got the flashbang in. So if I spawn an infected, pause the game, throw a stun grenade. And then basically, let's see. Let me see if I can get another one. Oh, you know what? The spitter might be bypassing it because it's damage resistant. Let me switch that over to a standard infected because they're kind of resistant to that. I'm going to change that over to you because that's a bad test. And then spawn back in, equal sign, hold fire, throw a grenade, stun. The spitters have a resistance because the idea is that different enemies are more resilient towards different types of damage types. Or ideas of how they're, so that way you have a pro and a con where a flashbang will affect certain enemies, the flamethrowers will affect certain enemies greater. So that way you kind of have to have some nuance of how you tackle attacking and fighting certain enemy types. That got in. If I kill him, spawn in, press X, she'll track the target. And then basically if I tell her to shoot, then she'll basically break out of it. Let's see, there we go. I put her in fire mode. But basically we got the cloak in. Now this is pending a major playtest. One of the big things that we need to do going into next week is that we need to have a big playtest of all the new mechanics and systems and see what people can break for the ability system. I'm already seeing a couple of things that we need to keep an eye out for edge cases. But for the most part, it is functioning as intended, and we have to just iron out some issues. One of the other things that we sought to do was we added a dot system. And a dot is a damage over time. So you're going to notice that there's this acid pool. It's been kind of just obviously just sitting here. And when the spitter would shoot at you in Legacy, it would basically apply a dot. And that dot applies for flame damage, airstrikes, just everything generally in the game. And that was another system that we got in over the course of the week. So if I move over this acid vial, you're going to notice he's going to take damage. And then you figure when he leaves the damage. And we didn't want to make it too multiplicative. So these don't apply a dot yet. We're going to wait to see how it feels for the first playtest and then go from there. Because let's say, for instance, if I reset the map and I spawn in, not with the operator because he has too much health. We'll do assault. Probably should have done a heavy. And then I spawn in the spitter. You're going to notice that even if they kill the spitter, one hit, let him shoot him. You're going to notice that basically he's going to take some damage. Let's see. There it goes. Oh, that's weird. Okay, the dot's acting a little bit funny. I'm going to have to look into that. But you figure the idea would be is it would tick damage there. I'm not really sure what's going on there. Here, let me check something. Yeah, it's applying a dot. Oh, I know what that is. It's because of the health optimization I made. Okay, yeah, I'm going to have to look into that one. That's a bug that I created because the dot is registering. It's damaging 2 per tick, and then it's clearing itself. So I'll look into that. I'll write that down. But the idea is that we did a couple of like float-based optimizations to the health, and it's probably a rounding error. So I got to look into that and figure out what's going on. But the idea would be is that when they take damage from certain damage types, it would apply a dot, and that dot would allow you to basically stack or to like basically have additive damage over the course of a unit's lifetime. Of like, okay, you hit them with the flamethrower, they'll burn for a little bit longer than the actual duration of them being hit with the flamethrower. So like if I move him over here, and he does it, you can see like there's like a little fire. That's an example of the dot working for him, but it's not properly attaching. So that's a bug I gotta look into going into Monday. But that's the idea, like there's a dot being applied. And if you see the fire on the spitter or on someone else, then that means that it's burning them and it's applying some kind of passive damage over a second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds. And that's a system that we're building going into next week and ironing out, I guess, because it's a bug now, where it would allow you to have weapons that basically just, you know, have cascading damage, or you can have like 3 sources and each one would have 3 indexes and they'd all burn additively is the idea. So one of the other things that we ironed out going into this week, and I don't know if there were people in here, there's a couple of people that were in the playtest, is that we had quite the issue with shotguns in some of the playtests, so that was also ironed out, and the shotgun code was improved. So if I do a SPAS 12 and I spawn him in, it was like doing some weird thing where like it would shoot their entire magazine in one frame. And it would just, we fixed that, and then Michael went through and he balanced the guns and he set up all the reloads for the shotguns like they were in Legacy. Some of the sound effects, I still don't like them completely, so we'll probably iron those out and tweak those a little bit more. But again, as you know, shotguns are best up close. So if I move him right here and I do the thing. Come on. Oh, shit. Yeah, that didn't work out great. Let me go ahead and try that again. Yeah, right, really? I think Michael's definitely going to have to look at those damage tables because they don't feel right. If you're that close to a spitter, it should be practically an insta-kill. That's like 5 shots? Yeah, that's kind of garbo. I'm going to put that in his channel for somebody to look into because it makes the shotgun pointless. But it is working, and Michael's going to have to go through and just kind of balance it further because that balance is not going to work for me. So that was something else that we kind of ironed out and got that situated from the last playtest. One of the other things was we got a lot of feedback towards the gates and their responsiveness. So if I put an engineer in, I can delete you, and put a player in, and then I put in a engineer, and I spawn in, and then I play. I'm going to demonstrate a new interaction radius for gates. So if I do this, if you guys haven't seen the new gate, this is a new gate design. I know there's not people here that come every single week, but it's beautiful. So I'll let him construct the gate. Cool, gate's up. Now we're gonna move away. and we're going to demonstrate the interact radius. And this is something you guys can bring up in the Q&A if you want to as well. But you can see it's a lot further away. So in previous playtests, when we were doing like the stress test, the network stress test last week, I think we had like 10, 12 people on a co-op session. There was a lot of feedback of the gates just felt like it took too long for them to respond to RTS units. And it took way too long for them to respond to the operator unit. Sorry, I don't know why I'm tripping over myself here. So I doubled the update rate and I applied additional optimizations to make it to where, because before you'd be right here and it would take like 4 seconds for it to respond. Now it's less than a second. So it's going to be really interesting how this feels when we do those really big play tests going into next week. So that way we can kind of gauge, like, is this good enough? Do we need to increase the radius? How does it feel? So that was another major change that we got in going to this week based off of play testing and just kind of talking to people in our Discord. One of the other things that we set out to do was improve the visuals of the SOC temporarily pending a total mesh change. Because you figure, like, we have the SOC here, and the idea was that each client and server, depending on what you were doing, let me just hide this. It's so bloody annoying having that debug object there. But save the map. Is that we had client-side, we didn't have client-side prediction for the crate. So if you were lagging or you weren't like in close enough ping to the server host, the airdrop that would come down for clients would lag and stutter, and sometimes you get a double drop. So that system was redone and revamped to make it server authoritative and then client-side predicted. So in the next playtest you'll see on YouTube and just playing it yourself on Discord, it should be impossible for the crate to lag when it comes down and they get airdrop. It should be completely fluent, clean, locally simulated, and it's the server that actually dictates when you get the money, and not, you know, and the clients aren't trying to like stay in lockstep for every single millisecond, which doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. So that was another change that we made. Just kind of iron it out, make the visuals more impressive. Now this is still pending a model change when we have the time. I'm not really happy with this asset because it's just weird. We're gonna have to go with some kind of like helipad or like set structure where a helicopter comes, drops off supplies and leaves. And it's like a pre-animated thing like Halo Wars. So it's something that we're gonna look into changing. Because the sandbags and everything else just exploits. Basically, if you're an operator, it invites people to want to jump into this little area, hide behind there, and then use the building itself for cover. Because again, they can't attack you unless they attack the structure. So it's like a walking exploit for the AI. It's a walking exploit. Yeah, so that was the problem, is that you figure when we had it open, an early playtest like 2 months ago, this was open, that was open, this was open, and the first playtest, people would just hide in there as the operator. They would hide their RTS units in there, and the AI, because of how our building system works, without understand well enough, oh, I need to walk in here and kill that person. No, they'd bug out, attack this wall, destroy the entire structure just to get to that guy. So it was like more of a limitation of just the system where like, yeah, we don't want to go in that direction. We want to make it more simplistic and just one-off structures that do what they need to do. You can't go on them. You can't hide in them. And it's just basically very simple there. So it's something that we're making a change. I don't have an ETA on this asset changing, but we'll go into that later. One of the other things that we did was hold on. That's trivial, but we fixed the leveling. Let me hold on my notes here. Oh, let's get right into that. So the operator was also a big thing for this week. So I'm going to go into the main menu Alcatraz, and I'll demonstrate that. Oh, yeah, torturing them. Yeah. So we put in a free parachute system for the operator, and one of the things that kind of persisted was the parachute was still kind of janky in terms of how it worked. So we got like a battlefield type of system. Michael still needs to adjust the meshes so that the hand positions are the same, because the girls are shorter in our game than the men. So the idea is that the problem is that, you know, he has to do those translations. So that's going into this week. But we spent a serious amount of time going into this, just cleaning up the parachute system, mirroring Call of Duty or Battlefield, where you can jump it goes in the parachute. And the animations Michael's definitely going to have to iron out. But the idea is that we're adding a jump state. We added the parachute state. We added the gliding or like free falling state. And those are things that Michael's going to polish up and keep animating and improving as we go. Like here's a weird little bug here that we have to kind of hunt down and find those little situations. But we finally got into the jump, and we've just been kind of been ironing that out. Because if you guys remember in the playtest, is that the first time an operator parachuted would just break for the rest of the session. So like now if I go over here and I walk off of this ledge, or rather jump off the ledge, I don't know why I clicked like that, then basically you can do this. They'll transition into parachuting, which again, we need to tweak the gravity. It's a little too slow for debugging reasons. When we actually get it to you guys in like a more final state, like going into the next week or so, then we're gonna like make that a little bit more heavier, because my God, that is like really slow. But it was just so I could demonstrate and just test it really quickly, because we need different numbers for when you're free falling versus when you're parachuting, different speeds, different control methods. So it's something that I'm going to just kind of iron out and clean up as we go into this week. Because like we got our butts kicked by just generally just the melee system and other little small ability system bugs, and just kind of hunting down and basically prototyping. Because one of the most important things for us was for the operator is not to make it a gimmick. So we started out with certain systems thinking this would work, and then that didn't work. And then I jump in the Discord and share screen it to a couple people, like the Patreons if I saw them playing a game. Or if I saw people in general comms, I'd join the room and be like, hey, can I show you guys something for 5 minutes? I'd show them, get their feedback, fuck off, come back a couple hours later, talk to them, rinse and repeat, or I just end up DMing them later out the day. Just getting feedback. Because, like, give you an example. There was another system that we prototyped going into, like, this playtest for the last, like, 2 days or so. We were trying to figure out what we wanted to do with the melee. We started with, like, a Resident Evil-inspired one, and that didn't really feel right. It felt too slow. It was cumbersome. It was clunky, based off of just generally, like, what's going on in our game. There's too many infected in the game to reliably like be able to like have a parry system and a block system and all the other stuff. So we ended up just going for more of like a World War Z type melee. Well, you have like a basic 3-way combo, 4-way combo, and we were prototyping this because earlier in the week we spent a couple of days trying the Resident Evil 4 remake approach, and I didn't like it. It was just weird. And you figure, like, we ended up adding a bunch of different systems that basically, like, flesh it out. So if I spawn in, I don't want to fight him because he has too much health. So he needs to be balanced a little bit more for melee combat. Michael hasn't had a chance to do that yet. So I'm going to spawn in a normal, let's see, standard infected. And then we're going to spawn in. And then I'm going to grab you. And this is still a system that's being heavily tweaked as we speak. And we're ironing out, we'll go into that. But basically, if I run over here and I press the V key, it will basically melee him and like smack him aside. And if I press multiple ones and I kind of gravitate like this, there's a soft lock system where basically it will push you forwards towards the enemy to keep the combat fluid. So like you can see right there, it detected that it needed to move her forward, lunge her forward, and then do an attack. So that's a system that we're kind of ironing out and fleshing out as we speak right now, going into like Friday night, going into Saturday, and then there will probably be some bleed over for Monday, because I'm still not completely 100% happy with the melee system. We're kind of using World War Z as inspiration or a reference, and that how we do this melee system would ideally bleed into RTS long term. So whatever decision we make, we want to make sure that it's adaptable and that it's extendable in terms of having a combo or some kind of different melee weapons in the future. People can have, because Michael wants to add a military like fire axe, and then he wants to have the standard crowbar knife, I think that we have there. I mean, actually, it's a machete, I lied. But we'd add like a crowbar knife, we'd add different types of melee weapons, and each one would have a different move set, different ways of controlling the weapons. Because you can see when I'm tapping V right now, it has like a 3-way combo where it does 1, 2, and 3, and the animations are still whip. Michael's going through and figuring out and animating and tweaking which the final ones are going to be. So just keep in mind that we're more focused on just like not the rest of the visuals, basically like the functionality of like how the damages are calculated based off of those circles and checking the locations between them, and then using that to pull and figure out who to be hit in each strike. So like if I press the equal key and I spotted a bunch of infected and I look in that direction, it will pull me towards them. And then if I run away and then press V, it will like lunge me forward. So again, this all came in the last 24 hours. We tried an experiment for Resident Evil 4. That didn't work out. We had to pivot. And we're experimenting with this approach right now. I like this direction. It kind of is close to the World War Z. I mean, Durvar, what did you think based off of what I showed you last night? Just to kind of open up the conversation more. So I'm just talking too much. The Resident Evil 1 that everyone hated. Remember? Yeah. Yeah. So that's yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're taking out. The biggest problem is that in Resident Evil, you're taking on a max of like 10 to 15. In another game, you're taking on 50 to 100 minimum. So you figure it came down to what made the most sense for our game design. We'd like to have figured out like a Space Marine Resident Evil 2 approach, but the numbers just didn't add up. So it was one of those things where it was just kind of like, well, actually, no, it's more of a Space Marine or World War Z, actually, I lied. So, again, it's just one of those things that we're just kind of experimenting and just trying to figure out how that works and then iterating as needed. And then you'll notice that we also put in an equip animation. So, Michael put in a placeholder animation. He's still kind of tweaking that and optimizing it. But the idea is it's kind of like a Lara Croft or Tomb Raider or like World War Z's animation, where it's like a generic one where it grabs the gun and it switches it out. And then it locks out your firing until the gun's ready. That system is also extendable to the RTS units. So once I have a meeting with Michael, because this came in Thursday morning, because I stayed up all night. So it came in Thursday morning, Friday morning, sorry. And that got in. So now we're going to have to tweak that and get that figured out for the RTS units. So they have proper equip and de-equip animations. It's the same base system that we use for both. And then Michael's definitely have to do some animation tweaking there. But you can see like the gun does go to the slot and everything else. So fun stuff there. That all got in. And then one of the other, okay, go. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'll probably play that for fun later tonight. Because again, the biggest thing is I was playing Last of Us. I've been playing Division. I've been playing World War Z. I've been playing a bunch of different games and just trying to get an idea of what's doable from our standpoint, from a resources to a manpower thing, and what we can sustain and what would make the most sense for our gameplay loop. And it came down to like, obviously World War Z and Space Marine. And now that we're going to just take it down the line and just see how far we can get it. Because again, the melee thing kind of derailed us a little bit because it took us, we thought it'd be a day. It ended up being 2 days for the melee for Resident Evil. And now it's one more day, at least another day for the current melee system. So ideally, we'll get that wrapped up going into Monday, Tuesday. And then at that point, we'll work on ironing out the last of the operator mechanics. Because you can notice that even right now, my goal has been basically ironing out and getting the operator fluid and clean. where like it feels like an actual third person shooter and not just some tacked on third person camera on an RTS unit like most hybrid games do. Where it's like there's not any unique mechanics, there's not anything new to it. And that was one of the biggest things that I wanted to do for the operator for them is if you're gonna make it a unique unit, you're not gonna just make it to where you can possess it or assault. It needs to like they need to be fleshed out, they need to play differently, they need to kind of work so where like your friends that don't like RTSs can come in and play with you. And you're issuing orders, you're yelling at them to do stuff, and then basically like you're the commander in the air with the drone just doing his thing. And then obviously we have up to 12 to 14 player co-op, so you could have 3 or 4 teams of operators with 1 to 2 teams of RTS players paired up, building in the world. So like you figure the hipfire got in, yeah. Sure. Yeah, that's the biggest thing is quantity over quality. Yeah, because if you just add every unit so you can control it, then you get a shit ton of weapons and that's all you get. So one of the most important things for me was like, okay, like let's give it a special control mode. Let's give them special models. Let's give them the ability to jump. Let's give them the ability to crouch, long-term proning, and just kind of take it as far down the line as possible, looking at Arma and Division and like, you know, all these other games and figuring out what can we learn from them. Resident Evil 2 Remake to make it to where like World War Z to kind of like make it fun. Now, we did redo the camera going into last night, so Michael's probably going to stab me. But you figure I fixed those annoying issues where like you'd get this, where you'd go inside the object and then you couldn't see your character anymore. So I spent probably this morning going into like Friday night basically ironing out the camera and making it just like World War Z, like the Division, where your camera actually has a proper collision. Instead of going inside that cylinder, it's going to dynamically path around. Or like in Last of Us, it's going to try and keep it to where you can always see your person and you can make, you know, the right decisions. And you would know, oh, my camera is hit here, I can't see. Then you switch the camera to the other side. So that was another thing that I set to this week to iron out with the operator to get that all fleshed out. One of the other things was that we redid the movement set for the operator. Hold on, let me change the time. So one of the other things that we, so one of the things, one of the other things that we set out to do was make it to where you have a more like modern camera for third person, like Last of Us, Space Marine, every game that you play, Horizon, where when you're not moving the camera, it's in like a rotate free orbit. But when you start moving, they go into a strafe mode. So like Last of Us, like or whatever, or like World War Z does this too. Instead of having that weird, like they face a direction every time, you have like this strafe move system instead, and you can shoot while you're strafing like that. Oh, I don't mean to click. I'm like clicking crazy, you know. But the idea is that way it gives you a little more flexibility, and then you stay in this firing mode until you go to relaxed. Michael is definitely going to have to tweak the relaxed delay down to 3 to 4 seconds just for the operator, because they're using the RTS code in that instance. So you figure like they wait just as long as the RTS units do, which just feels artificial and fake. It needs to be like after you stop shooting after 3 to 4 seconds, then they put the gun down and they go back into relaxed pose. And then Michael's also working on a hipfire animation state. So when you fire like this, they don't bring it up to aim, because there's no difference between aiming and shooting right now. So that's something that Michael's going to have to set out to fix and improve. One of the other things that you're going to notice is that we have a turn to shoot mechanic in. And once you do it, it locks you in so you can shoot. And then you can basically like, you know, keep shooting. So like that, and then shoot that way, and shoot that way. But the idea is that like it's like a division kind of deal, or like any other shooter you play for third person. Again, that combat mode, like alert status needs to be reduced. But like boom, I can shoot that way, and it waits till you turn the direction, and then it pulls the trigger. And then when she relaxes in a second, and then you can see it does that. And then we fix the crouch so that there's no longer a transition. In Legacy, not Legacy. In Legacy, it had this issue, and in the last couple months of builds, it had this issue where if you switched and you crouched, and when you were doing this, it would do like a weird like seizure with the camera. It was a translation issue of reducing the size of the capsule, so we need to just add some corrective math there to make it to where it just normalizes it and kind of like cleans it up in that frame. Michael is definitely going to have to iron out these crouching animations because they're just too dynamic. She leans too far forward and just, yeah. Because keep in mind, I'm going to be getting on Michael this week to kind of iron that out. Right now is about 12 operator weapons. I think like 12 to 14 weapons that he has to kind of iron out. He's remodeling and re-adding all the attachments to, which I'll show you right now. So as it stands right now, going into this next week, our goal is to basically finish the operator as you see right here. Is like fix whatever bugs there are for hipfire, if there's any remaining, get her attachment system in, get it so you can change her appearance, and then add in the skill points and the attribute points. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that up just to remind people. So let me go to my conversation with Winter. And then I'm going to just drag this over. And then open it. Oh, screw you. I hate when it does that shit. Why does everything have to open in a goddamn web format? Oh, it's so much more convenient. No, it makes my life harder. So, screw you, Chrome. Or I mean, whatever that is, Edge. So, one of the biggest things that we're going to be looking at this UI and gleaning over, basically converting it over, so that you have like little mini RPG characters that are RTS and are TPS heroes. So you name them, you set their appearance, you choose the abilities, it keeps stats for that unit, and then it keeps the attribute points, like in Skyrim or an RPG, where like melee damage, accuracy, reload speed, infection resistance, health, armor, vision, target acquisition time is probably pretty much gone to our project at this time. So these are things that we're looking into going into next week. That now that we've started to like iron out the last aspects of the operator and get like the base fluidity working and passing it off to the animators. Like now it's Michael's problem. He needs to figure out the animations. He needs to make them look more aesthetically pleasing. He needs to set up the transitions, set up the hipfire. We've done our job. Pass it off to him. Now we're moving on to the next element, which would be basically the what I just talked about. Is that, and technically there's one other thing that I'm going to talk about very briefly, is that we're working on a squad system. And that was one of the last things that I was working on last night, where the idea would be is if I go to an RTS map, I choose you. I'm already in that map. Oops. And let's say I grab you, grab you, grab you, grab you. And I'm going to play in the map. And let's say I go to my game. Now, there's no UI for this yet, because we're going to be working on this going into Monday as another bonus item for RTS TPS coordination. But if I go to my squad registry, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Fox, whatever, like these are these squads here. And the idea is that you can assign units to a squad. Like I'm going to add this guy to 2. So he's going to show up here as a squad member. So I just added that operator. And then if I add this scientist, which you'll have a UI for, we're not going to make you guys use console commands. And these 2 guys are in a squad now. So the idea would be is that they can see each other's data and health when an operator is playing. So if someone's possessing that operator, he can see all the data and all the information like in Battlefield or Call of Duty locally. So that's another thing that we're working on right now as we go into Monday, is having it to where like, hey, you know, I can have a bunch of operators in this squad. Like, I don't think I have another operator here, but you can imagine it in Fairyland. Is that imagine this as an operator. So let's say he opens up his menu and he adds himself to a squad. Now these 3 players can track each other. They can see his information. They know where they are at all times. And we're looking at Battlefield and Call of Duty and Warzone and a couple other games to get some ideas and armor for their group management mechanic. And we're using the group management mechanic from Arma and the squad system from Battlefield as inspiration. And we're doing a mock-up going into Monday, Tuesday to kind of make it to where, like, if you're playing as him, you can see everyone. And then when you remove them from a squad, then great, you don't see their information anymore. And people can leave squads anytime. So if I want to remove this guy from squad 2, then now he's out of the squad. Now I can't see his information. And obviously this would all be done via a UI, a UX, like a, something from like you press escape, you go to squad management, and then you'd be able to add and remove people from a squad. This is what I talked about probably a month ago. And basically, like, this is what we're pushing for in terms of, like, that level of interoperability of, like, coordination. And this is independent of groups. So let's say, for instance, these guys could be in a group, but if an operator is possessing this operator, you give him an order, he's going to ignore it because there's a player playing as it. But this is a layer on top of local groups, because groups are hotkeys or groups are local, squads are global. So the idea is in that way, squads are more so for communication and management, and long term for communication like radios. Think squad, or think Arma, or like channels. So we're going in that direction of like the whole tactical communication and like coordination, and then being able to have like information and stuff that's only presentable to your squad is the idea. So again, this is like a back-end system where like this is how we're managing it, where you can see like the other squads are empty, like Alpha is empty, Bravo's empty, but Charlie is the one that has the 2 people in it. So I'm still on the fence about making these squads humanly nameable, because I feel like people are just going to name them weird names the whole time. But I'm not against it. You guys are welcome to bring that up at the Q&A part. If like you guys feel that you guys would want to just be able to name Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, where it starts with like a starter name, and then you can change it to any name you want. So it can be like Dark Squad, or like Forward Squad, or Duravar's Rangers, or whatever. And the idea is that way, when you bring up the menu, it would grab that data and then be like, oh, I want to join Duravar's Rangers. Another thing we'll have to look into is probably making it private, so you could have like a password to join. So that way, like some people, or just have it manual. Battlefield does a locking and unlocking system, but you have to just unlock it when you know someone's going to join, and unlock it when they leave, I believe, as the older Battlefield used to do. Correct me if I'm wrong. I might be misremembering that. But those are things that we're looking into that will come over layers of just releasing the playtest. And the base version, squads will just be interchangeably just joinable by everyone, because these aren't persistent servers. These are like a listen server. You're throwing it up. You're playing with your friends. So theoretically, you would know. You'd be able to like, hey, go in Bravo, go in Charlie, and they need to be able to join interchangeably. So generally, you should be able to trust everyone you're playing with in those instances. But that's another system that we're kind of just baking in and setting up the foundation alongside other bug fixes and tweakings that we've been doing ongoing throughout the week. Here, let me bring up my notes. Hold on, let me put that over here. I don't know, Derivar, what do you think about that in terms of like the approach? Okay. Or we do make bad decisions, but everything is about playtesting and just basically figuring out what works and what doesn't. Because things that sound good on paper don't always work, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Or they're not doable yet. Yeah, the biggest thing is that I think what most people don't realize, and just talking out loud, is that game design is testing and figuring out what works and what doesn't. So like you figure like for me it was like, okay, like we had to try it, see if it would work, and then see if we could make it work with our resources. We couldn't, so we had to pivot. So we ended up looking at other games and being and course correcting of like, okay, this is not fit the kind of gameplay we're going for. What can we do? And then we went in the tangible direction of the other melee system. So actually here, let me actually show one more thing that I neglected, is that if I go over here, oh, I don't want to move that fast. So if I, hmm? I dig it. One other thing that I neglected to show is that Winters, there's no passive yet for like showing it here, like I mentioned earlier. But she does have a passive that allows her to boost the XP of units in a radius around 20%. That's something that we're looking at visualizing going into the UI card. If everything goes to plan and the operator doesn't throw us any more wrenches, then that would be on. Hold on. Let me bring it up. Hold on. Ah, okay. So one of that's going to be on the UI card that I've been talking about, where this is all of our UI assignments for half the week next week, ideally. It's just kind of going through and just getting in these quality of life changes in. Um, but you'll see that basically like yeah, that's in there now, and you can actually see the XP does increase, but we need to kind of give some UX to that. And I have Winters also working on this. Where is it? We're gonna be when we get to the UI card, we're gonna be implementing the newer UI that he kind of fleshed out, which I will show you in a moment. So let me pull that up. Ah, actually, so this is the other thing I'll show briefly is that we're working on a newer UI for the HUD widget. So we're doing like mock-ups for like getting rid of some of the more uglier stuff, making a progress bar for the waves, showing when a wave is completed, and we're just kind of sending these over and testing with different UI elements. So that's something else that we're kind of playing with and just kind of ironing out the visuals, testing different colors with our concept artists. I don't know why it keeps opening a new tabs. We're doing different mock-ups, different designs to kind of figure out like how we're going to present information to the player from the UX and the UI. So that is something that we're also is ongoing, and that we're seeking to rectify. So like here, if I show you guys, where is it? Hold on. Third, I fill the air while I find this graphic. No. Ah, here it is. I think what most people are most excited for is to get to the point when we get to the rebuild, so we can actually finish up the vehicles and continue where we left off. Because you figure like these are the mock-ups that we're doing for the new doctrines, and these are the mock-ups that we're doing for the UI. I met with Winters earlier in the week, and we're gonna move some graphics along on the bottom left because I don't like aspects of the mini map. There's too many like we're moving some stuff around going into next week, but these are some mock-ups of like the doctrine screen we're playing with. The bottom right area for the airstrikes is definitely not final yet, and we're going back and forth on that design. But the general idea of like the bottom right command widget and the theming, the doctrine sheet, and then generally the operators. Those are all things that we're looking into, and then getting rid of one of these extra. I think it's 2 extra rows. Yeah, 1 extra row, and bringing that back down to legacy standards, making this box preset because this details box cannot be resizing dynamically all the goddamn time. It's ugly and it's bad game design. So, we're just kind of going through, and we need to get to a point after the operator where we just kind of iron out all the remaining kinks and just process through the UI, get the hovers back on. So if I hover this unit, it shows the details. If I click on it, it shows all their proper information, like in Legacy. Those are the things that we're working towards as it stands, to finish up phase 1 and get it to a point where anyone can just play the game when they want, and they don't require us to have like a preordained time on the Discord, and when we're just doing limited testing. So that's a big goal for us going into next week, sorry. It just kind of depends on what kind of issues present themselves, because I'd like to try and get everything by Wednesday to Thursday. That might be delayed until next week, but things are very fluid. So just bear with us as we're still just kind of working through the issues that we're presenting tonight. And we'll obviously have another update. My goal was around Wednesday to Thursday. Well, Wednesday or Thursday of this week, next week, I'll make a post on Discord letting people know where are we in terms of basically, can we go public this week, or we have to wait another week? Because at this point, the biggest technical hurdles for us is what you see here, where it's like we're skinning the horde elements, we're putting in the operator mode follow, we're putting in the operator issue move orders, we're putting in the server-side squad system, fixing the issues like what you saw for like the horde jumping and all that. Move order for the operator, stop order, follow order. So like in Legacy, for the squad system I talked about previously, if you take units and you assign them to a squad, then that would allow you to issue move orders in that squad. Now, we're going to play with the idea of anyone within a squad can issue orders for the AI, and then if that becomes a problem, then we're only going to allow the person that's designated as a squad leader manually to do it. So like the host will have to designate a leader, or we'll have to basically just allow the first person that joins the squad to have admin for that squad. We'll play with the idea of keeping it open, because again, you're playing with people that are only your friends and you know everyone. So we'll see if that's enough, and we'll just kind of go from there. But again, these are all the things that we're working on going into Monday. Ideally, right now, I've passed off some. The reason why we started this podcast a little bit late was that I passed off some work for what Derek needs to do for these two, follow AI and the issue move order. So, hold on, that's a duplicate. I was writing this at like 3 a.m. in the morning last night, so I made a duplicate. I apologize. But the idea is that follow AI, that is also a duplicate. So you have move, stop, follow, skinning the horde elements, a server-side squad system, and fixing the jumping issues that I showed earlier. So these are the issues that I'm working on going into Monday. And then this is the stuff that Derek's currently working on. And then when these assignments are done, then we're going to basically we'll probably have to put off putting in the ability system for the operators so we can at least get the UI in, because you can't even play the game for the RTS properly until that's situated. So we'll probably have to do the UI, get all that situated, and then from there, some of the auxiliary items that we're going to have to do is obviously the to-dos here, which are bugs and small quality of life changes that we need to do to the game. And then we'll officially be able to enter phase 2. This is everything as it stands that we're just kind of working through in our mind to be done with phase 1. And some of these could be hours, some of these could be a couple minutes, 10 to 20 minutes. It just kind of depends on the task and what's involved. And since last time we met, it was what we talked about that I mentioned earlier. Let's see, I think 14th. Yeah, so we've processed out from here to here. And there's still some things that weren't even added that were processed out. Because sometimes things are just set in passing and the card isn't made for it. We're not a bureaucracy. So everything doesn't have to always be written down for us to do it. So that's one of the things that basically we're just kind of processing through, just to kind of give you guys a visual indicator on YouTube of what we're working on and what's going on. The next thing I wanted to show was the progress on Efren's map. So if I load up his map, which he went out of town this weekend, otherwise, because that's why he's not talking about it. But if I load up the Monterey Bay map, I can show the progress that we're having for the Horde map, which again, that's an undocumented thing that we have to do on that list. That's like an unspoken thing where we have to just kind of spend a day or two to add that wave-based mode that I talked about in the Steam post. And you guys are welcome to ask questions about that as well. Where like if I bring that up, not there, I want to go here. Really? It's so annoying. So this right here was one of the posts that I made last week, and one of the big things was this map, was the Monterey Bay map, based off of just the limited playtest that we did have. There needed to be a lot of edits and changes to the Horde map. The game mode side of things to facilitate proper gameplay. So having wave-based spawners, which are these little orange dashes on the outer edge, and then as you lose these circles, then it folds in. So if I go into this map here in F11 and zoom out, you can see that basically you have a strategic objective here. You have a strategic objective here. You have another strategic objective here. And then you have your final strategic objective here. As you lose them, parts of the city will become lost to you. Gas towers come up. You take damage whenever you enter that area, infection damage, so you'll lose control of your units. Any structures or buildings that you have here are destroyed within 60 seconds if you don't refund them. It's a full retreat. So the idea is as you lose those strategic structures, that like this area of the city right here is now owned by the infected once you lose this communications relay right here. And then at that point, they're going to start spawning along this edge at like subway tunnels. It's different things, different objects that are outside of your area, and they're basically going to charge in and try and take out the remaining strategic objectives, whether it be the central regional command here, or whether it be the medical research facility here. And if you lose this one, and you lose this one, then they're going to start spawning in an L to try and take out the regional headquarters here. And if you lose all three, then you get boxed in. So it's a U. So they're going to start spawning around you in a U, and we'll give a reasonable couple of blocks for a buffer. So like say for instance you start here, they would lock off somewhere around here in this area. So then that way you get like 3 blocks in every direction, the stage of defense, and to basically hold on for the 50 waves that the Horde mode lasts for. So let's get right into the map changes itself. One of the other things that we were doing is kind of playing with different spawners. This is kind of ugly, but we kind of put this off for last minute polish to kind of go back and see what kind of ideas that Efren can play with to get like organic ways of them spawning besides every single entrance just being an underground bunker, but then everything ended up being a tunnel or a cave. So this one actually feels kind of cool, and I like this design, but you can't use that everywhere. Otherwise, it's lazy and copy and paste. So it's one of those things where like we're having him focus on just do the city itself, get all of that ironed out, get the cars in, get this all of the like miscellaneous stuff in to make it feel like an actual city. And then you'll see that he'll go back and he'll replace these little generic spawning locations with more like cooler looking, fleshed out ideas. So here and there will be replaced. We'll have maybe like a subway tunnel that like lets out over here, or like a building that's destroyed that like the warehouse, whatever they come out of. There's different ideas to flesh it out. Sure. And to basically just kind of like have like the same thing here, where we'll have them come out with like a layer of structures that they spawn out of to be able to push the center regional HQ. And if I spawn in, which I'm going to die, because you figure the problem is that their AI is going to try and go for the strategic resources. But if I zoom out, you can see basically like this is how it's kind of like layering out. It is really dark because of the fog of war, so just bear with me. But the map is quite large in terms of basically its size. Like you actually have to jump around and just kind of like, plan and just kind of coordinate. And we were working out just the technical issues of making sure the AI understand these walls and going around them and setting up holes. I think we're going to have to push it early. I was saving this for pandemic, but these walls make the game too easy. So we're gonna have to push the idea they can destroy these walls or run through them when they're going through them. Otherwise, it just makes it into like a weird a tower defense that's lazy. So we're gonna have to change that as well. Yeah, going into next week, is that something else that we're ironing out as we're just kind of populating and filling in the city? Because effort is just kind of going grid by grid to just kind of flesh out the city, add the miscellaneous stuff, and just kind of iron everything out. So you can see a lot of this has changed since last time we met. Adding parking sites and adding like different building subdivisions, blocking out the spaces. You know, there's a soccer arena here. I think that's soccer. With their parking lot, the floodlights. You know, a lot of cool little attention to detail. He's just kind of chipping away as he goes. Let me just move around on the bright one because that just doesn't look good. You guys get the idea. It's playable. And just kind of fleshing out these areas. It's a slow process, but it's slowly but surely coming together. So I'll just kind of pan through some of this. Yeah, but it's still like you can see where it starts to kind of hit empty, like here, and these areas, and like down these areas where he needs to kind of like, I believe he left off before he went on his trip over here in this region, and there's still a lot of negative space that he needs to fill in and just kind of level design. So it's just a matter of just kind of going through these areas and ironing them out, and then from there, I have to go back and do like this is actually really nice, like this stuff, and this is gorgeous. Like this kind of stuff, it's really cool. It's nice. Like he's doing it. He's just kind of like getting inspiration and looking up stuff online and just figuring out like what can he design in the area. And like there's no car path. There's no parking meter path. There's no miscellaneous small clutter like trash cans and all that. So that's gonna come in. That's gonna kind of help cement and iron out the fidelity of the level and just flesh it out more and more. Because you can see like he's kind of just doing small little grids here and there. And this is the regional headquarters. This is like your primary operations where you're building. And you're coordinating your RTS players and your operator players. Yeah, so you figure like this area looks really nice. I love this area. I was drilling into him that he needed to get rid of those two structures on the left and the right. And it needed to be more distinguished. It needs to be more like established. Where it was like more grand, like Oscorp Tower from Spider-Man. You know, like stuff like that, where it's like, it kind of like, you know, it takes on a life of its own. Of like, it's not just a random skyscraper in the middle of nowhere. There's like importance to it. Does that make sense? You guys hear me? Okay, all blazed. Yeah. Yeah, so it's one of the biggest things is basically just kind of cementing that. And we're slowly, well, he is slowly but surely doing excellent work, just fleshing out the area and just figuring out the gameplay spaces based off what we learned from Legacy of like what are the funnest areas to play in. Like this area is completely empty and desolate. Like all of this will be gotten to as he just kind of goes through and irons out the neighborhoods. And I think this is a grocery store. So it's looking really good. Like you figure, give it another week and might be another closer, like a quarter to another half of it done. And then at that point, ideally, he'll be working to kind of like add in the cars and all the other stuff. It just kind of depends because like you figure, we kind of got fucked by that Iran shit because Dimitri's in Israel. So we were going to talk into that, is that the timeline for the hub is probably destroyed at this point because he's dodging bombs every other day. So you figure we don't have anything to show for Alcatraz. Blame Iran. So it's one of those things where basically I don't give a fuck. But you figure it's one of those things where we're gonna have to just roll with the punches of when he can do work, because originally the plan was to have him start on the interior of this structure. He was working on this before the bombs started dropping. So you figure he needs to kind of iron out and get this cemented and finalized. And then he has to work on the interior Which again, I don't have a timeline for this island anymore, based off of the severity of the war going on. So we'll roll with the punches and just kind of figure out how things go and adjust accordingly for Alcatraz. I'm not even going to give a timeline. So if we have to go and just give you guys an untextured island where everyone just spawns out here as a bunch of little screens that you walk up to and you interact with, we'll have to go that option. But his safety is what's most important right now. So just keep in mind that what might be the last minute pivot that we're going to have to do. We did put these in because players kept jumping into them, and in real life they have this little netting here. So we put those in. We put those in temporarily just to basically buy him some time to basically figure out that and to just build out the main building. Now the plan is once this building is solidified and done and the interior is done, then he'll start chipping away at every one of these structures and texture them to 2 to 4K like high res textures and just make everything look more photorealistic via mega scans and real world photogrammetry. So slowly but surely, when we get back on schedule, then he'll basically be working on these areas. So just keep that in mind. I don't have anything to do to show for this island besides that gate, this area here. So yeah, it is what it is. Beyond that, though, going into this week, one of my major goals is just to finish out the operator and to get his ability, his attribute system in, do the UI, God willing. Oh, and the weapon customization system, which I briefly talked over, and I'll show our list, because I know I'm guilty of doing this, is I don't actually ever show the list. So if I go to our weapon list, this is the weapon list for all the operators, or that Michael is doing the attachments, the balancing, and the weapons for. So you have the AA-12, the CZ Evo, the FN Evo, the Glock 19, the M4. Oh my God, my headset. That is acting weird today. I apologize. But basically, the FN, the iCarvel, the KSG, a grenade stun, HE grenade, the R700, the P320, the AK105, a FAMAS, an HK416, the MP7, the P90, the UMP, the M14, the R700, the M249, the R870, and the M393R. And those are the weapons that we're focusing on for the operator from an RTS and a TPS standpoint right off the rip. All their models are done. They're all in the engine. It's just a matter of myself and Derek finishing our backlog so we can get all the guns in, we can get them programmed, and we can get it to where you guys can customize them and change the attachments that Michael has already made or he's remaking. Some of them he's remaking just to make them to better standards, but conceptually, on paper, they're all done. It's just more of like trying to make them look more aesthetically pleasing for today's modern times of like more higher poly counts and all the other fun stuff. So like here's the MP7. And then P90, you've already seen that. Let's see if there's any new weapons I can show. Scar. So again, like that's the general weapon list that we're going through. The grenades are definitely not going to be accessible until we get the ability system ported over. So just bear with us on that one. And then what I will show is I'll show the meshes that he's been working on for the operator, just to remind people. So these are the base ones of Alan, Cassandra, Kira, Veronica, and Hanzo. And then there's sub outfits that he has to import going into next week. Shader compiling. And then Veronica. And then Kira, which is... And then we have Cassandra. And then we have Alan. And there's a couple of sub variations for them as well. So those are things that you're gonna get the ability to just kind of change out the mesh going into this week, so that way people can actually have operators that they choose, they customize, they have their own weapon loadout that they field. Um, I don't have an answer at this time. If I do get the question for being able to customize the operators live in the field, for right now, we might just make it to where you can only customize them when you're at the hub, and you just make different classes and different loadouts. Long term, if there's enough demand, we could look into making, because the idea is it's a full-on gunsmith UI, so it's not anywhere as lightweight as the one we have for RTS. Like there's a whole customization, there's a whole like suite of things. So that might be something where you do it here in the wings, and then you go into the map and you actually use your customization and your loadout and you level them up. And then at the end of each game, or if you want to go back and customize, you leave the session, you customize them, and then you come back. So it's something that we might have initially in that approach, and then we might pivot based off of demand and just what people think. Let's see. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up for the operator stuff that we're doing now and going into next week, so we will have a clear idea for questions. Because one of the biggest things is, try and keep the questions framed for like the end of phase 1 and everything else ideally. But if you guys have something that's been burning at you, feel free. Derivar, is there anything else you want to add before we open it up to the Q&A? Okay. Again, this is the new time and day for the podcast. One of the big days the same, but the time is earlier in the day, so we can try and accommodate more Europeans, and not be as crazy late for people that are in Germany and Europe and everything else, and not just only be for Americans and Australians, and it just fuck off everyone else. So I assume this one was going to be the roughest, just because of like the time zone change. Ideally, yeah. Yeah, it's the feels. Oh, I went to sleep. I was playing Last of Us till 5, 6 a.m. So I have no idea. Yeah, I still got my 6 hours. I'm sorry. Like literally, never mind. I was trying to compare myself, and I was like, wait, no, I actually got my hours. I intentionally went to sleep at like 5 or 6 a.m. and then watched Y-Files for 30 minutes. Um, so let's see. Huh? Yeah. No, I hear you. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Check my list. 3, technically. Yeah, okay. I'm just checking. I'm checking your time. Um, there's one more thing. Hold on. Oh, yeah, sorry. I am neglecting one more thing, and then we can go to Q&A. There are step pulling questions. If anyone has questions, feel free to drop them into the channel, and we're going to get to those. Um, so, right, and taking hands as well. Again, but one of the other things that we did was the where is it? Can I show it in this map? Yeah, I guess I can. Lord. So it should work. No, I don't think it's gonna work on this map. Give me a second. Yeah, okay, yeah. No, it's not going to be on this map. This would be a bad example. Let me go into the co-op test map so I can show it real fast. I'll wait for some questions to pull. So on YouTube and on Discord, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them. But I wanted to show some of the other smaller changes that I made for the operator that you can only really appreciate when you're playing as them. We moved the text substantially higher, so they're not always in your way when you're shooting infected. We decreased the size of the visualizations for like the zones, and we made them more transparent. I was looking at Call of Duty and Battlefield and a couple other games and just seeing what they do. We are going to be downsizing on that text and making something that's more minimalistic and simpler, so at a glance you know what's going on and what direction they're coming from. That's one of the other major things that I want to do, is improve the accessibility and the like UX, so it's easier to know, like to see, you know, to be able to play the game. Because even when I'm playing the game, sometimes I'm like, where, like, it's hard to see sometimes, like a headshot, like this right there, the health bars. They're so insanely large. I increased the height of them, but clearly that wasn't enough. Derek's better at UI, so I'll probably have to have him go in and clean up that UX and see what we can do to make it more humanly readable. Because I absolutely detest how large those UIs are. Like, you can't actually play the game, I feel like, in some cases, because of it. And then you can see the hipfire in action. Oh, crap. There was a change that came in for the recoil that we are tweaking right now. Michael is redoing the recoil patterns because we did have to improve and just kind of clean up some methods of how we do it to make it easier. Because like the pistol recoil is just atrocious. He's gonna have an entire card going into Monday, Tuesday to make the pistols and the rifles more sustainable when you're shooting normally. So just keep in mind, like, before we open up the operators and get all the attachments in, he's gonna have to go into an arena and make sure that everything's working correctly for like the recoil to make them enjoyable and fun to use. And make sure, yeah, the attachments add, but it should not be the end all. A gun should not be unusable without attachments. That's garbage. Like, it should allow you to hyper polish a gun's shooting and performance, but it should not be you have to have this attachment, otherwise you cannot use this gun. I hate that kind of progression in games. So it makes it, well, meta. So it's one of those things where like you figure that's something else that we'll look into that's gonna be on his task sheet, like this right here, where it pops so much, but the M4 is more sustained. Where every gun has a recoil pattern. So if I go to the M4 blueprint and I go to its data asset, you can see there's a vertical curve and a horizontal curve. And the idea is based off of those curves, it dictates how your gun is going to swing when you shoot. You can see the horizontal is pretty much zeroed out temporarily until I can meet with him and we can figure it out. But the idea is it hits an apex and then it continues along that curve for as long as you're shooting. So you can have Rainbow Six Siege types of like precision for like different firing patterns for different guns. So there's some nuance to shooting a gun. Okay, so let's get right into questions and we'll go from there. So I'm going to move into the question Q&A area. We have 20 to 30 minutes for questions, Durvar. No, not this time. It's only internal for the time being. The only time we show it is on Saturday podcast for the time being. The only one that's publicly available is the Notion page, which is sorely outdated. I'm waiting until we get a little bit closer to the end of phase 1 to phase 2 to redo that one. I'm kind of using the YouTube channel as like a scratch pad of like showing progress. But you're right. We probably do need a forward-facing version of that. Let me think about that one. I got to figure out that one. But yeah, go back to your question, Durvar. Next one. Pandemic? Minimum of 4 or 5 months. Easily 4 to 5 months. Like, I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. We need another week or 2 to finish phase 1. We need a minimum of 1 to 2 months to finish phase 2. We need a minimum of 2 to 3 months, maybe 2 months for pandemic phase 3. I'm not rushing it. I'm not cutting corners. Everything needs to be done correctly. Everything needs to be done finally. So then that way there's no take backsies, there's no changing things. Yes, sure, we might have a Solaris moment where we reinvent and change mechanics, but it's not because the systems are systemically broken. It's just because we're trying to improve things, you know, like quality of life, stuff like that, how they redid the barracks and Solaris and stuff like that, or unit military recruitment. That kind of stuff is okay, but you figure for right now, I'm trying to take what we have right now and take it all the way down the line. So when we enter phase 2, we're doing the vehicles. I refuse to move on from phase 2 until the helicopter and the vehicle pathfinding is bugless and complete. I don't care if people are saying they want pandemic in this moment. We need to finish what we have now, finish it all the way to completion. It's done. There's no bugs. There's no issues. and then move on to phase 3. So it's the same thing for phase 1. I don't want to move on from phase 1 to phase 2 until everything in phase 1 is ironclad. It's tight. There's no issues. I mean, there might be some minor bugs that we can't recreate that are very obscure and very rare that we can't wait for, and we need more additional information. That's just going to happen for any kind of software design or any kind of game. Every game we play, known demand has bugs. But you figure it's about basically figuring out the ones that we can fix that are high priorities, and then the ones that we can't recreate, or some things that are like so crazy that it's like a 1 in a million chance we catch those when we can catch them, and those would not be a reason to stop not going on. But you get what I mean. That's the most important thing for me right now. Do not make the same mistakes that we've made systemically for 5 years. We've already been criticized and debated for years about we need to stop adding new stuff. We need to take what we have now, iron it out, bug fix it. Now, right now, mind you, we're rebuilding it. So there's only so much we can do in one given moment with 2 programmers, more than half programmers, because sometimes I don't program every day. But to me, it's about basically not rushing to the end, because again, you're just going to be mad. You're going to get the vehicles, or you're going to get the pandemic mode. It's going to be half-baked. It's going to be shit. It's going to be it's not going to be any substance. The name of the game this time around is quality over quantity. Yes, we're making the improvements to the operators and other mechanics like that, because those are sorely needed, and we want to get to a point for the co-op where you've seen it on the YouTube videos. People are having fun. I cannot. The most fun we've had in the game in a long time was when we were playing the co-op, and we had the operators, and we had the and the RTS. They were coordinating. We were communicating of like, hey, we need operators to go do a sweep down the street. We need RTS players. We need RTS players firing flares in these grids. We need a sweep team over on the far right. We need heavies and assaults. Like, to have that kind of like pyramid of gameplay is like, it's beautiful that we're building towards for the end of phase 1. So I feel like when we get to phase 1, there'll be enough of a value proposition to hold people over with experimental and base to buy us the time to work on phase 2 and get the airstrikes and all the other stuff in that's on that list on the Steam forums thread in, and then move on to pandemic. And then, because pandemic is not just pandemic, it's dynamic civilian groups, evacuation, better pathfinding for all of them, the Chelsea, alternate start mode, so you don't have to play with Chelsea and their lieutenants, and then custom game options. Custom game options on drugs to the point of Project Zomboid, where it's basically one of those things where, you can actually customize your game and make it your own. That's an important design goal this time around, is making it to where you can do that. And that's something we're going to be dedicating a considerable amount of resources into, to make it to where, like, you can make the game your own. But yeah, anyway, back to you, Dervar, for the next question. I think he fell asleep. Okay, he fell asleep. I'll just move back to the audience. He woke up way too early for this. Okay, next question. Let's see. Let's see. Do we have anything else? Feel free to drop your questions on YouTube or on Discord, and I'll just answer them as they come in. If you have a question that you want to raise on voice, feel free to raise your hand, and I'll pull you up to the voice so we can chit-chat. We'll do this for another 10 to 15 minutes. Then what I'll do is I'll open up a playtest on Discord so people can play and test the game for themselves. We'll go into a room on Discord and play co-op for about an hour or so. I'll take down some notes, talk to people on the voice channel, and then we'll just kind of go from there and the playtest, and then we'll pick it up on Monday, Tuesday, what we discussed with the docket. So on YouTube, and just keep that in mind for cats on YouTube, is when I say that we're transitioning over, people on YouTube that have the game are welcome to join the co-op playtest that will be playing everything you saw. The new operator, the new hipfire, the new melee. Melee is kind of cheesy, so until I get the changes in that I want, just keep in mind it's going to be kind of broken at times. Let's see. Oh, I already answered that question for Herbert. Only the operator is going to have melee for the time being. The operator is going to kind of be our test bed to basically see how it feels and just kind of go from there. If anyone else has melee, it'll be the heavy for the riot shield or the assault for his riot shield. That's the most we're going to go for melee for the time being. For fourth question. The operator is the only one that I'll be able to actually actively engage in melee from RTS and from a TPS standard. Let me pick up my notes. Okay, some people are writing a question there, so I'll give you some chance. We're focusing on both. If we focus on the single player only, then the multiplayer can't be done. You have to program both in tandem and not in contest of each other. A way you do one mechanic in single player is done completely different in multiplayer. So let's say we go and we do the whole game in single player. Now we have to reprogram the entire game for multiplayer. So yes, it adds more work, but it's unavoidable. Like you figure at this point. Like you figure we did the whole single player approach, and then when we actually started doing the multiplayer and the co-op, we realized that most of our code, if not 80 or 90% of it, has to be rewritten, refactored, or reoriented via its flow control. So it was like, well, fuck. Let's just, on top of that, the other issue I mentioned in the Steam post. So we learned the hard way of like, okay, we're going to just need to just take the time that when we build this, we test it 2 times. We test it in single player. We get it working first in single player. And then once we're happy with the general idea of it, the concept of it, the mechanic of it, then we port that to multiplayer in the same day or the next day, depending on how long it took to implement the single player mechanic. So we're doing both, if that makes any sense. We always do it in single player first, so we can at least get the flow down. Can an engineer get a large weapon as a primary? All of them are currently in secondaries. That's intentional. With every engineer weapon that's going to be a big gun is always going to be a secondary, and that will always give a lightweight primary. It'd be like the general like damage dealer that they do, like the daily driver, M4, SMG, shotgun. But then the secondary is meant for situational moments, like Helldivers, where it's like you need. Well, technically, it's a treachery gun, Helldivers. But the idea is that we figure like we go that route, your primary, secondary. The secondary is for emergency situations, and that's the game design flow, the ideology we're pushing when it comes to like how we divvy that up. Okay, so people typing there. So then I will talk about. Let's see here. If I can open up that map. So when it comes to the operator, primary is going to be your primary gun, like your M4, your assault rifle, whatever it is. Your secondary is going to be pistols. If we end up making it to where, right now, the operators don't have any explosive weapons. They have traditional weapons. I have not made a determination yet with Michael. That's something I need to talk to Michael. It could go either way. I think we're going to end up doing the same way, where the secondaries would be basically your big guns, and you basically sacrifice a pistol or a side or like a pump shotgun for it is the idea. But I'm pretty sure that's what Michael plans on doing. I need to talk to him a little bit more about that because right now, I think the most you have for explosive is the M107. The M107 is the answer to the Juggernaut. Yeah. Let me see. Technically, you could do the M249 because that had armor piercing. And then the A12 is also for specials. Yeah. So there's a couple of different options. Again, we're not stuck to any one way of doing the operator. This is our official idea of how we want the operator to work. We'll put it in there and then get y'all's feedback. So it's important to basically just keep that in mind. Is that not everything is like nailed down and set in stone forever? This is our idea of how we feel like the operators are going to play with the basic weapons tool set. There's about like there's quite a few weapons on this list actually. So there's about like 20 or so weapons actually allied on this list between pistols and primary weapons. And one of the biggest things is like we'll put that list in, we'll have the basic customization, and then we'll just kind of go from there to see how it feels. Experimental is for co-op. If you want to play co-op with us, if you're talking about just generally playing, I would recommend experimental every single time. Because experimental is a newer build by 6 months. The last time that the normal build was updated was around August, I think it was. Well, just keep in mind, just because shotguns exist stuck in other games doesn't mean they're going to suck in our game. I personally love shotguns. So it's going to be a thing of like Left 4 Dead, where shotguns are going to be devastating up close and mediocre at medium to large. So that's just how they're going to be balanced. Shotguns are not going to just be crappy in Cepheus protocol, even from an RTS, especially to a TPS standpoint, where they need to kind of work for their role. Crowd control. Okay, what other questions do we have? I guess what I will do is I will show, while we wait for questions, we'll give it another couple minutes, then we're going to start the playtest, is I will share my screen for the people that are coming in later. I will show the melee system that Derek was last working on. Oh, okay. I dig it. I don't think shotguns are that hard. They just point in a direction and pellets do the rest of the job. But all right. Okay, so let's see what we have here. All right. Well, I don't think we have any more questions, so we're just gonna wrap it there. It'll be a shorter podcast. We're gonna segue into a playtest. So, thank you guys so much for coming and basically jumping in and just seeing what we've worked on this week. What I would say is just bear with us as we're just doing this transitional stuff of getting the operator in, getting the UI in, doing some more bug fixes, and then getting it out to you guys so you guys can actually play it at your own leisure whenever the hell you want. And that's our goal going into next week. I'm going to say it again. The goal is update you guys publicly around Wednesday to let you know if we're going to meet that goal or if we're going to bleed over a couple of days. So I'll do the post on Wednesday on Steam, relay it on Discord, and regardless, we'll aim to have a playtest, another public playtest around Wednesday for all the newer mechanics and systems. Oh, yeah, one more question? Okay, hit me with your one question real fast. Let's see. Hold on. Give me a second. Let me open up Legacy and then we'll wrap it there. So, yeah, I'll just show you. It's hard to quantify. So the question that they asked was, how large is the final map that we envision for pandemic? So one of the biggest things for me was trying to encapsulate Treasure Island, Angel Island, San Francisco North, Alcatraz, and the little park area by the Golden Gate area, the Golden Gate Park. So let me briefly show the general area that we're working with that we're going to be porting over when we get to phase 3, because the biggest thing for us is we want to give enough horde maps at the same time to give enough gameplay value while we're working on just kind of getting all the phases situated. So here, let me oh. That's why. Oh, you know what? Hold on. That is the older map. I want the... Give me 1 second. Technically, I can do... Yeah, I'll just do it that way. Hold on. The master was migrated over to the other project, and this is an asset still missing, so that'd be a bad visualization. So I'll show it in the legacy version. Oh, yeah, that's going to take way too long. Hold on. Yeah, that's going to take way too long because I have to shader compile. Give me a second. This one might be... No, that won't work. Fuck. Okay, I'll have to just open the landscape to give you an idea, because the problem is that you figure it would take like 10 minutes just to open that project. So bear with me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open the landscape because that'll give you an idea. So we're going to go to... That was the old... Will that work? Might be fine. I'm going to risk it. Okay, well, it's about basically 3 to 5 times the current map size. If I were to quantify it, so this is just going to be the San Francisco North area by itself. But then you have to add on Alcatraz, which is what we're building right now. It's going to be an empty version of Alcatraz. It just is basically most of the areas are cleared so you can build it instead. Then it would be Treasure Island as you know it, with the two fictional islands. The one on the left deleted, the one on the north, Power Plant Island deleted. The old like weird fake island that's like next to Treasure Island is going to be deleted. A small one with that large bridge. The fictional island on the left of Treasure Island is deleted, so it's just Treasure Island by itself, like it is in real life. Then it's Alcatraz on the left, Angel Island to the far north, and then this land maps to the south. And that would be the general idea, if it decides to load. Because I recently reinstalled my computer, so when I did that, all my shaders probably got gone. Come on. Okay, well, I'll see if there's any other questions while we wait for that to open. Will there be a big map when it comes to conquests, taking down Chelsea, or will it be multiple maps? It's going to be a pandemic. So the idea is that the current map, so we'll finish phase 1, do phase 2. While phase 2 is going on, before I officially move the level designers back, I want them to try and pump out a couple more horde maps with the standard of choose an area and a locale of the Bay Area and design them to the same fidelity of the Monterey Bay map that I showed you guys previously. And then from there, from there, basically, once we get a couple under our belt, we cut it at a certain point and then have them go back to this map, which is basically porting over whatever is not ported over and upgrading it to the modern standards and then, getting it all playable. So, like, this map is massive. Like, if I spawn in... Let me go to the master light. U. F11. I mean, the map is huge. You figure if I were to... Oh, this might be dangerous. I'm just going to give you one reference point. This is the only reference point I'll give you because if I do any more, it'll take too long. But I will add in the Treasure Island landscape so you guys can compare it in terms of size, because this is ultimately what's going to take up the level designer's time. Efren will finish the current map. Dimitri will finish the main menu. He'll come over and help Efren whatever's still remaining at that point for getting it over the final hurdle. Then they'll both go and work on maybe 2 or 3 more horde maps. That will stall us. That'll give me and Derek about 2 to 3 months to get the phase work done. Ideally, by the time we get to phase 3, you guys have gotten at least 2 to 3 horde maps. And then at that point, they can cleanly move back to this map. So you can see there's Treasure Island. There's a new map. About 2 or 3 times its size, give or take. And you figure one's an urban jungle, and one's just basically it's the map you've known for a long time. So that's the biggest thing, is that you figure, I want this to be Kitty Island. This is a Toil Island. This island, so just to give you an idea, this is being deleted. This fictional island over here is gone. That's deleted. The current Alcatraz map we've been building out is somewhere over here. The other island with the Angel Island is moved way over here where it is in real life. And this would be the total playable area, the total offering right off the rip. Theoretically, we have a plan that we want to expand it into a perfect box. So the idea would be is that if I get my way and time allows and we get more resources after the co-op and everything else, I'd want to design the forest area over here that you see in Planet of the Apes. Like a small little cutout to make it a perfect mini-map box. But again, this is already enough. You figure this map is ginormous. And basically, when you actually zoom in and you look at like the object density of the city, like there's a lot going on. So you figure like you have a little mini division map to run around in, whether it be you're playing an RTS or you're playing in TPS. And this is all just going to be a pandemic. Like you can see, these are all just block outs that someone made just to get the general specifications of what we were going to put there. And then like the Lucas Arts building is somewhere over here, I think. Yeah, Lucas Arts is somewhere in this province. And then there's I forget that one museum, the water one they have in San Francisco, very popular. So that's like a blocking asset, so we put in there. So we have to go back and make the proper one. The wharfs are over here. Here's the famous wharf, where they have the seals and all that over here. And then Alcatraz will be somewhere over there. So again, there's a lot. And you figure, it's a, let me talk out loud. Basically, the basic gist would be is to get this map presentable, to get it playable, but not looking pretty. It's probably a week or two. And just a lot of untextured assets. To get it to the point where it's presentable and fully textured, using procedural materials or like reused materials and just using it intelligently, it's probably a month or two. And there's still just some assets that are untextured here and there. Because we're going to be feeding it into like how they did the Matrix demo, where you have a procedural building generator, where you feed it a bunch of walls and like different assets, and it constructs it for you, like how they do on really big open world games. So that way you can like feed it 100 walls, 100 residential, like think of it like Lego blocks, where you feed it like a 10 variations of walls, 10 variations of this, 10 variations of doors, and it just generates stuff for you, and then you override it and you change it, and then you bake that out and export it, but everything's already textured and optimized. So those are things that we're looking at. So we're not using like the same prefab. This is not a carbon copy of that one, carbon copy to that one, carbon copy to that one. The idea is that there's a little bit more randomness, and with nanite and other features like that, it's kind of changing the way that we go about designing these features. Like those are the civilian evacuation assets. So that's how we do civilian evacuation. Like those are the points that they move out of from like legacy. So you can see like someone already went in and set up all of these test assets that have proper civilian evacuation. Some of them at least. That was not set up correctly. No, that is set up correctly. That's a visualization, but that should have been centered based off of the root of the object, so that's a root issue. But you get the point. Let's see, what else do we have here? And then obviously you could see where the carrier comes into play, because then you could just dock the carrier and like land LCACs at this beach, along this beach, or you could just have it. The water would be extended naturally, so like they're gonna have a massive land breadth of water to play with. I mean, you figure, because like you have all these docks that you could dock at and set up like a little military outpost and have your friends, you know, building over here or doing all the other stuff. So you can kind of get an idea of what we're building towards. And the compromises that we're levying to get the hordes at least in there is something for you to play. Use the horde maps that we kind of have right now that we're building is like a stepping stone to the main course, you know. Because they figure like this map right here is going to be our golden standard for horde maps of like attention to detail, how we lay it out, the layering objectives, and then that will build the foundation, aspects of the foundation for pandemic. So theoretically, by doing the horde mode the way we're doing it, it's at least laying some of the foundation that needs to be done, like the zones, which are already in, and all that, for us to be able to make that jump and not have as much stuff to worry about. Because again, for people that are joining later, this is going to be the new horde map, where it's going to be like a layered defense where you're just like breaking up into teams, or you're playing by yourself if you really want to. But anyhow, let me see what we have. Any new questions I don't think there has been. I think I answered that question for like to death. So, well, what's that? No, Greg. I mean, I guess you could. No, no fleets. You have your LCAC and you have your LHA 6, at least for the time being. Like, if I had my way and I had more resources and more programmers, then sure, we could look at the destroyers and battleships and all that. But for right now, I need to keep it controlled, managed, and maintainable based off of our workflow. Because like you figure, if there's an entire mechanic for this that I can't advocate for spending 3 days on, but if we could figure it out, it'd be great for immersion. Let me see if I can find it. Where are you? Ah, here you are. Let's see if it's going to work still. Yeah, I don't think it works anymore. Bummer. Put a new one in. Yeah, there's like a whole control rig where this opens up to bring sky cranes out. I guess it doesn't animate anymore. But yeah, so it's like that kind of stuff where like long term for like a quality of life, attention to detail thing, I want to get this set up again. Get it to where that, because it had a multi-stage system where it would basically like, this would open, it would raise a sky crane from the elevator. It would basically like open up the hatch. It would lift a sky crane out. It would take off, and then it would close and seal up again. And if you were a player, obviously you could die from it. Not really sure what's going on there. It's probably just some silly little thing that broke at one time or another. But anyhow, okay, let's see. Yeah. So that's one of the biggest things there. I'm just curious. Huh. Animation blueprints mapped. Oh, you know what that might be? It's because it probably doesn't play. Might be. So if I go over here and I press F8 and I click on you and I go to so yeah, I don't think it's gonna work anymore. It has to probably be updated. Something probably broke. Oh wait, no, it did open. Yeah, it did open. That would be closed platform. And then it would be open platform. And then it would be raise elevator. Lower elevator. Yeah, okay, so you can get an idea. Basically, this is something we were prototyping. I couldn't, it doesn't affect gameplay. And we have so much stuff going on that it's something that's on an auxiliary list that I have to find the time for either me or Derek to implement and replicate when the carriers were instrumental for gameplay. So you can have like this kind of stuff going on. Because it looks great. Looks so cool. But you feel like there's like a flow. I think it's too complicated. I think it needs to just be a direct flow. You press one button and it does it. Because otherwise, there's too many things that can go wrong by having all these buttons. Is like, it just needs to be commence opening sequence, commence closing sequence. And then a looped montage intermediary for like if we're waiting for AI to catch up or something. And then you can see there's like that bug where like it teleports. If I close Skydeck. Yeah, you get the point. So yeah, it's like little stuff like that that I'm just kind of stalling for until we have the time to kind of get that replicated. And then I need to kind of get something simplified for it. It's a little too artist friendly and not, let me rephrase that. It's too technical. There's like some aspect of it need to be refined and simplified and made into one-off animation instead of controlling each individual aspect of it as one thing. It's too easy to break. Let's see. Yep. So that's that. Okay, so we're gonna segue into the playtest part. Feel free to jump on my personal Twitch if you want to watch us play that. I'll link that in the YouTube. We'll switch to another channel. Give me about like 5 to 10 minutes to just get everything set up and cook another patch for the thingy. Anyone that wants to play, just join Playtest 1 after I leave this channel. We'll just sit in there while we get everyone staged to get everyone downloading the game. Again, thank you guys for coming. I appreciate you guys taking the time to jump in, ask questions, and just see what's going on with the game. If you want to support the game, feel free of just buying a similar pack on Steam. Check out the book. Consider being a Patreon, whatnot. They do have a Patreon weapon thing Michael does where, like, you get to pick a weapon, and then you work with him to basically, like, assign it to a class. The FAMAS, the Attack 1, and a couple other guns are from Patreons that pledged for 3 months. So we are open to that as well. There's also a civilian designer kit if you want to be in the game, where you can, like, we'll take your face and we'll put it as a civilian. Just keep in mind it has to be an infected variant, so you're not going to look pretty as the infected variant. People are going to blow off your limbs. So you got to be okay with that too. 10 out of 10. But anyhow, have a good night, and you guys have a great one, and we'll be here again next week.